think we should start. Hello all, my name is Josh Ramoinian. I'm the Prop Tech and Innovation Chairman at NYU Shock. As someone who's very passionate about real estate and the technology sector, I'm proud to be serving as the MC for today's critically important webinar. I'm also a longtime supporter and fan of CREtech and appreciate their team inviting me as an MC to host this webinar. This is another terrific way to see the CREtech team supporting and encouraging the next generation of real estate tech leaders. As you can see in the slide, you can register now for next month's CREtech Consulting Talk on effective sales and marketing strategies for real estate tech startups on Thursday, December 3rd. Our expert speakers will share their insights on what tactics they have seen work most effectively, as well as how to avoid costly marketing and sales mistakes. On December 15th, don't miss our next virtual demo day featuring demos from the most innovative tech companies in commercial real estate. Virtual demo day is the best way to discover startups that you need to know about without leaving your desk. And finally, make sure to register for the BI Summit on January 26th to the 29th. The Business Intelligence Summit will bring together thousands of the world's biggest landlords, owners, developers, and brokers to discuss strategies, case studies, and thought leadership regarding the growing importance of data. Join us to network and learn from your peers about how you can use data, business intelligence, and analytics to take your own business to the next level. You can view and register for all of our upcoming events at www.cretech.com/events. And now I would like to introduce today's lovely moderator, Louisa Dickens, co-founder of LMRE. Louisa, take it away.
Thanks so much for that, Josh. Hi, everyone, and welcome to CREtech's webinar on best practices for tech adoption in real estate. My name is Louisa Dickens, co-founder of LMRE, the global prop tech recruitment firm. So if you're looking for a new opportunity in this space or hiring, please reach out to me or any of my sort of wonderful team at LMRE. I'm also host of the global prop tech podcast called The Propcast and Fresh Bread News, where we deliver daily updates on real estate and tech news. But enough about me. I'm sure we'd all agree there's been major steps in the embracement of technology solutions, especially since this year of COVID-19. But there's also been a major disconnect between interest and adoption. This is caused in large part by an industry caught up in higher priorities and technology companies viewed by many as too fragmented to provide integrated cradle-to-grave solutions. However, those who recognize the power of technology and adopt it, they will be the real winners as they maintain their competitive edge, stay efficient, and be most profitable in the long term. I'm not sure if any of you listening read the recent report by EY and CREtech, but it looked at the industry as a whole, and the results demonstrated that technology as a strategic agenda was on high priority for 69% of the respondents, and 61% have adopted one or more technology tools. Many of these tools, however, are still at the early stages of adoption, so it's quite difficult to see the results. But today we will hear from Eric Floor, Senior Vice President of Transformation of Arcadia, Susie Bashmore, Chief Technology Officer of PGIM, Chris Magny, Consultant of CREtech Consulting Innovation Practice, and Kim Lewis, Senior Vice President of Oxford Properties, as they will share insights on how real estate companies are adopting and building innovation cultures within their organizations. Our panel today will discuss everything from hiring, culture, training, obviously all about implementation as well, and that are enabling companies to embrace technology throughout their organizations in the most effective manner. So once again, thank you all for joining, and let's start the conversation. How about we start off with, we all know the conversion tech has been highlighted in the past few years, but especially in the last year of COVID. Eric, why don't you sort of start us off with, what digitalization have you seen happening over the past sort of 5 years, and then we can come on into the most sort of recent year which we're in.
Sure. Thanks, Louisa. First off, I think we've seen a tremendous amount of progress even prior to the COVID pandemic. I remember attending the first CREtech event about 5 years ago in New York, and there was about 100 of us with about 2 hours of content. Fast forward to last fall with the event, which was in New York, where I think there were 3 or 4,000 people in attendance with almost a full week of content. I think that shows you the amount of interest and excitement that we've had in this topic. A couple of specific areas where we've seen a much greater interest in technology than we have in the past at Arcadia is, first off, a willingness to integrate systems even across companies. Several years ago, your company was your company, Arcadia was a separate company, and we needed to have some sort of a manual information exchange. However, we're now seeing companies much more comfortable with using APIs and other electronic mechanisms to facilitate that information exchange and overall make the deal process much faster. Second, we've seen a lot of interest in digitizing static documents and making sure that information is not stranded in Excel spreadsheets or in purchase and sale agreements, et cetera, but we're capturing that information and being able to put that in databases to run analytics to know what's actually happening in the market in near real time. We've also seen, both on the brokerage side as well as on the owner operator side, a much greater interest in virtual and self-guided tours. It used to be we needed a leasing agent or we needed a broker to go out and take you through the property. Obviously, with the pandemic, that's been a big challenge. And you're seeing people get much more comfortable with using electronic means to get either potential tenants or potential buyers interested in a particular property.
Susie, I'd love to bring you in here as well to tell us about what you've seen in digitalization over the past few years within PGIM.
Yeah, so hi everybody. First of all, it seems like every year there seems to be a new buzz about some kind of technology you should be focused on. And I recall a few years ago, it was more about, how can you have technology on all your devices, not just when you're, logged into the network on an application, but, being able to access data and systems on your mobile devices. Then it seemed like the emphasis was all about, what is the user experience? And so, understanding what your clients are doing on your websites. And then it seemed like, here and there, it was all about agile methodology. So again, getting the business more involved in technology initiatives and delivering, solutions quicker and faster. Then last year, it seemed like it was around robotics and machine learning. And so this year, for us at least, it's been all about data. So you can't pick up some kind of technology magazine and where it says, you should have a data strategy. Data should be used as an asset. And then along with data, all the business intelligence tools, data analytics, predictive analytics, data scientists, all of that. And then I'm sure everyone's aware that video conferencing has definitely been at the forefront of this year due to COVID. So I'll stop there.
I guess this brings us on to, everyone talks about it the whole time. Big question, how's COVID impacted your business? And more sort of real force, the realization for technology adoption. Eric, I know you'd like to go into a little bit more, but how's it help your business to reimagine, I guess, their operations to extract sort of more value, I guess, from each asset in the portfolio?
Sure. So first off, I think it accelerated a lot of pre-existing trends. One of the things Susie mentioned was about data. Everyone has known that data is very important. However, when most markets have had steady rent growth, relatively flat or slight expense growth, it's been pretty easy to underwrite a property, value a property, and in some cases be quite accurate in terms of projecting what that property value may look like several years down the road. Given the pandemic that we had this year, that created a massive disruption, and you're seeing situations where a potential buyer may want a haircut on a property given the uncertainty of what's going to happen with the pandemic and the property's performance. But the seller feels, particularly here in the US with government stimulus, most properties in the multifamily side have actually been performing quite well. And I think you're starting to see a much more granular emphasis on data, much more real time. I think people are much more willing to share data maybe they were previously, just to get a sense of what's happening in the market. And also you're starting to see a greater embrace of what I would consider to be alternative data points. Things like, can we actually start looking at particular risks at the tenant level on who might be able to pay rent, those sorts of things. Can we begin to look at things like cell phone data to see foot traffic? Can we begin getting down to understanding credit scores of potential individual tenants in a multifamily property? Those sorts of things, which previously may have been available but weren't needed given you were pretty confident in the way a property was going to perform. Now that there's a lot more uncertainty in the market, you're seeing people being much more willing to get into the details and try to use some of these alternative data points to say what's actually happening in that property today and how can I project that out through the rest of the year, the next quarter, or the next 6 months to understand how that property is going to perform.
And Susie, we mentioned when we last spoke, obviously the demand for better quality of data. What has sort of PGIM been looking at to, I guess, generate sort of more value of their assets?
Yeah, so I'll first mention, I have to mention this. So with COVID internally, you know, when COVID set out, we had a couple of video conferencing tools that were available. And so then once everyone was told to go work from home, all of a sudden everyone was, you know, crying out for Zoom, and Zoom was not one of our, you know, approved solutions. And so we had to quickly work with our global technology to get them to approve the use of Zoom, and then really just offer more options for our user community as far as if they want to use WebEx or Zoom or, you know, Teams. And then also mentioning Teams. So last year when we had started rolling out Office 365 Teams, I'm not sure if, you know, all of you who are listening have used Teams yet, but it's collaboration for, you know, sharing files, updating files at the same time, et cetera. But we tried to roll that out last year, and it just seemed like the user community was not interested at all. They just couldn't figure out why they would need it, why they would want it. And then, of course, once everyone was working from home, all of a sudden they desperately needed it, you know, so it was really interesting how they all clamored to be able to get on that. So externally at the property level, you really cannot ignore some of these prop tech advancements, you know, in order to make your, you know, properties more valuable. You know, the consumers are demanding more digitized services, you know, how they request service, how they pay their rent, how they control their utilities. And, you know, with all the ESG, you know, effort in place, that's another, you know, putting another demand on prop tech in addition to, you know, controlling security.
And I guess once we've started using some technology or chosen it, how important is a company's leadership to, I guess, articulate the vision of what technology they're going to sort of use, you know, how it's going to evoke sort of change within the business? Kristen, maybe you're a good person to start this off. You know, have you seen a change in attitude from senior management in different sort of businesses from your experience?
Thank you, Louisa, and hello, everybody. Great to be here today. I think we still have a long road to toe when it comes to leadership's involvement in the vision and alignment around innovation initiatives. People don't change unless their desire to change is greater than their desire to stay the same. And people don't generally have a desire to change unless there's a vision for the future that is greater than where they are today. And so that's the role of leadership in any innovation initiative. The challenge with technology is that technology typically carries the highest time to acclimation and the highest amount of disruption in an organization. And so having a lot of enthusiasm at the front end of an innovation initiative isn't going to get you to the end of the road. And to be perfectly honest, your technology doesn't matter at all if nobody adopts it. So the role of leadership is to create some enthusiasm inside of the organization that carries over the entire life cycle of the implementation of that piece of technology, and making sure that there are touch points along the way so that there's transparency, which is where your data comes in, so that there's a user-centric, or what I like to call a human-centered change, meaning that, you know, at the end of the day, there are people who have to interact with this technology. It's not just about the executives. At the end of the day, they're probably not touching the technology. Somebody else is. And so there needs to be a much broader view, I think, from the top in terms of the level of impact and the level of disruption an initiative may cause inside of an organization.
Quite a few things we need to look at and probably address. Kim, I'd love to bring you into this conversation as well. Kim's obviously Senior Vice President, Oxford Properties. What have you seen at Oxford in terms of sort of your approach and strategy to this?
Yeah, hi everyone. Yeah, you know, I think, you know, to Kristen's point, like senior leadership, you know, always has played a huge role in describing the vision and trying to make it real for an organization. I think sometimes that's difficult when, you know, you need to make like a giant leap forward, right? It's not small little incremental changes, but if it is truly a transformational change, sometimes that's hard. In the last few years, there's definitely been a greater sense of urgency for, you know, to make this happen, you know, in every facet of the organization. And frankly, I think, you know, we as an industry have gained a whole bunch of confidence in executing change that just stemmed from how quickly we were able to shift an entire organization to a digital way of working just as a result of COVID, right? So, you know, many of us have spent, you know, years trying to get, you know, an entire organization down that path. And now, you know, we're all pretty much hooked on Teams, Zoom, et cetera, which is amazing. And it happened, I want to say, just like that, right? Interesting. And, you know, I used to have a manager that said, you know, never waste a crisis. And there you go, right? So, but the other thing I just wanted to kind of bring into this is that, you know, at Oxford, sort of the key shift for us is really driven by individuals and teams that have the greatest knowledge and vested interest in the outcome. So while leadership plays a role in kind of setting out the vision, where we've seen much of our success is when we take that and then as a group disseminate that. And, you know, for us, you know, I love who coined this, for us, by us. So it's not a top-down mandate, thou shall do this. It's more of a grassroots movement, right? That's shaped and kind of grown by cross-functional teams, you know. And so that's made a huge difference, I think, in our ability to innovate, to own, and kind of feel empowered as an organization to kind of drive the shift and change that we're all after, right? That supports the strategy and growth of the industry that way. So.
And I guess so once we have the wider business from sort of, you know, the junior guys to the senior management on board, what tech savvy talent are your businesses interested in or hiring? Eric, I know Arcadia sort of hired most people from as a head of innovation, obviously data scientists. What was your first hires you looked at recently?
Absolutely. So a few years ago, when we got serious about our digital transformation, we started first with a chief innovation officer. And as a result of that, we have built out a fairly sizable organization we have a chief product officer, a chief data officer. We hired dozens of software engineers. We've added UX resources. Pretty much you name it, we've added in the last few years. And what we've found is, in touching on some of the things that Kim mentioned, this really is a cross-functional effort. If you come at this solely from a data scientist perspective, you may end up with some great analytics, but you may have a user who really struggles to understand that. If you just solely focus on the UX aspect, you may have a very seamless workflow, but maybe the content and the data underneath that doesn't actually provide the type of insights, and ultimately it doesn't get the type of adoption you need. We have found the most success when we're able to pair the right technology resources with a handful of business users who have a vested outcome in being successful. We particularly have been successful with generally more junior level brokers who maybe don't have their established book of business, still looking for an opportunity to differentiate themselves in the market. And they can really grab onto these tools, work with our teams to build something really incredible, and then get some success under their belt.
Yeah.
And that's
And,
it. Oh,
sorry, carry on.
Louise. I was just going to say, Eric, like that's a really good place to start, right? Because then you've got a user community that's excited about the technology, that's excited about what it can do for them, right? And start to grow some momentum within the organization towards maybe some of those other areas that, you know, is a little bit more difficult to get at in terms of adoption.
Yeah, I think on top of, I was just going to say on top of what both Kim and Eric have said, and all of those positions really crucial, but also identifying, you know, change champions or ambassadors in the organization that are more, you know, in that group of people who are going to be having some sort of interaction with whatever that is at the end. Getting them involved, even as early on as the decision-making process, creates momentum and you know, excitement around what's happening. And that end user, you have that end user insight to carry along with your process. Another piece that I think is really important, and maybe it's not hiring somebody, but it's considering someone in your organization and how they'll be a part of this, is your communication folks, your internal communication folks. And, you know, how are milestones being communicated? How is the why being communicated? And how are the achievements along the way being celebrated? Because again, keeping in mind, high time to acclimation, you know, you may be looking at something that's not really going to impact the end user for 12 plus months down the road. So, you know, that's a long haul to be thinking about.
Susie, have you got anything you'd like to add to that?
Yeah, at PGIM, we've also recently hired a head of innovation. And so our next step will be to set up an official data governance organization, in addition to some of the more sophisticated tool sets where, you know, you can have an automated, you know, data dictionary instead of something in Excel. Also, what we've done is we've set up work streams within the business. And so they're prop tech work streams. And so it's up to those work streams to come up with business problems they're trying to solve for, and then go out and recommend some of the, you know, recent new technologies that we would like to pilot. And so again, by doing that, we feel like that's, you know, the business is owning it. They're coming up with the problems, they're coming up with the recommended tool sets. And then of course, they'll partner with IT to, you know, pilot and, you know, figure out, is that something we want to explore or adopt? So that's what we're doing at PGIM.
Awesome. Thank you for that. We've just had a question come in from Vajid Ali, and this is directed at Kim. What kind of technologies and product combinations are prevalent in real estate, or specifically at Oxford? You know, which platforms are preferred?
So I'll kind of take that question top down, right? So our tech strategy is really about adopting best-in-class SaaS platforms, preferably out of the box, right? So, you know, it depends on, you know, which area of focus you're talking about. So leasing for us, that would be, you know, VTS. For investment, we've got DealPath, you know, et cetera. And so best-in-class SaaS is kind of the first, you know, the first criteria. And then as you kind of peel that back to Eric and Susie's, you know, point, we want to make sure that we're able to get that data, you know, from whatever process or platform, and we call them global process areas. We want to be able to get that data into our data lake in a way that's consistent and of quality, and then be able to use it however we want, right, and need through analytics, machine learning, et cetera, robotic process automation, all of that stuff. And so, you know, is there any one technology we use? No, not at all, but we kind of go forward based on a set of practices and principles, making sure that it aligns with our strategy, making sure that, you know, as an example, if you're, you know, part of the leasing process in the in Canada, we want to make sure that you're using generally the same technology in the US, in Asia, in Europe, etc. Right? We're looking at global platforms that can scale. And again, we're not looking at building our own stuff either, right? So we think the industry has come, quite a long way in the last little while, and there's lots of really great platforms out there where organizations and companies, whether they're startup or established, have put some great investment into this. We want to piggyback off of that. We want to help those organizations continue to grow their product, right? Contribute to that, but then also reap the benefits of that. So I'm not sure if that answers the question, but I don't know if anyone else has anything to add to that.
Anyone else want to add anything? Otherwise, Majid, I hope Kim gave you a good enough answer. This leads us quite well. But I guess, okay, so once we've chosen the technology, okay, we've made the right hires. Okay, I'm sure the journey of the implementation of this technology is not a smooth procedure. Not only is it obviously difficult to change perceptions across the business, maybe with brokers, which Eric, I think you've got something to say about it. What are the barriers to the implementation, and any good ideas of how to overcome it? Eric, why don't you start this question?
Yeah, I'll segment my response into that into the brokers, and then second into the more internal operations, because I think they're different challenges. When it comes to brokers, you generally dealing with people who are solely driven by commission, which in some cases can make it a little challenging to drive change. On the other hand, if you can find a way to align the technology you're rolling out to increasing their commissions, you'll generally result in very quick adoption. Also, you generally have people who consider themselves a little bit more free from corporate control. And I would say the number one way to guarantee failure with a broker is to have your CEO send out an email saying you must do something, and then it's guaranteed to not succeed. But again, just touching on something I had brought up earlier, we have found the most success driving change with broker and broker teams in finding that relatively new broker who doesn't have a long book of business, they don't have a huge deal book they can draw back on, they're still building their contacts. And if we can provide them with the right data analytics, if we can provide them with the right insights, and we can appropriately train them to be able to communicate that to a client, they have been extremely successful in taking those out to the clients. And as you start getting that traction, you then start having your more established brokers say, wait a minute, here's someone that hasn't been in the business quite as long, and I see they're in our rankings of top 5, top 10, top 15. How did they get there? And then they'll generally start reaching out to that broker, understanding that it's through the use of data and technology. And then that starts getting more and more people interested. And when you start getting your top brokers bought in, that starts percolating throughout the organization. And we had our head of production at our last in-person sales meeting that we had in January prior to going remote, who was on stage. And I think he said something very well. He said, if you don't start to adopt these tools, then it won't be me firing you in 5 years. The market will have essentially put you out of business. And I think we are reaching that inflection point where a lot of people are starting to realize if they're not all in on this, then the business is going to start letting them behind. When it comes to more of the corporate side of things, I think it's a lot of your traditional change management practices that Kristen hit on earlier. Can you get them bought into why this is a problem? Can you get them involved in helping shape the solution? Keeping them informed as you're working on a solution, given it may be a while until it actually gets in their hands. Can you allay the fear that automation means job reduction or cost reduction? And can you educate them that by using some of these new tools that are available, we can actually eliminate a lot of the manual work that you do today, eliminate a lot of the things you go home and you complain about to your family, and ultimately make your job more fulfilling.
And if we're talking about, I guess, buying, Chris, and I know you've done some survey work on Gen Z. Is it getting fairly frustrated? Is it a generational thing where you might get the youngest, you might get more sort of buying of a business? How can we get more sort of general integration throughout the whole business and all employees?
Sure. Well, your Gen Z and your Gen Y already are against top-down change. So that's number one. They want to be, for any organization, we hear a lot about social justice these days, and 4 fundamental concepts of social justice are equity, access, participation, and fairness. So for your Gen Z and your Gen Yers, that's already something that's high up on the list in terms of things that are important to them. In our survey work and our employee survey work that we've done, we see the highest level of frustration, unnecessary workplace frustration, coming from your Gen Z. Now, there's not a high percentage of Gen Zers, in the business world yet. They're still coming in. And then your later generation, Gen Yers, so folks that are still under the age of 30. And the comments tend to be specifically about technology, about the fact that things are inefficient, that they don't talk to each other. They have to log information in multiple places. They have to document things in multiple places. They have more logins and passwords for the company that they just joined straight out of college than they've had in the first 20-something years of their life combined. So, so we have to not only design the technology for the end user, but we also have to design our implementations with the end user in mind. And, we started out this conversation talking about COVID. And, one thing that I think we should all be paying really close attention to are the steps that have happened around bringing a vaccine to market. It's a really fascinating case study, because a lot of these companies that are now at the finish line are actually technology companies more than they're pharmaceutical companies. And so you look at what they've done over the past, an expedited timeline, but we're still looking at 10 months. And how many horses were in the race on the front end? And now we're down to a couple of companies, but all along the way, several of those companies have been very transparent. They're sharing their data. They're talking about milestones. They're getting the public involved in phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. What has it done for these companies? Look at their stock prices. Okay, so people feel more comfortable investing in something when there's some sort of level of certainty around what the outcome might be. Now, long story short, none of it matters. At the end, what's most important is the efficacy and then the adoption. So we have still 2 huge milestones, even though we now, as of today, have 2 vaccines that are finding to be over 90% effective. We still have the whole efficacy around that as it relates to the actual delivery of the vaccine, and then people's willingness to adopt it. So it's a fascinating case study in the implementation of innovation. This is all very innovative. And it's something that I think that we should be paying attention to.
Yeah, 100%. And Kim, I'd like to bring you in here. Tell us a little bit more about Oxford's approach to this so far.
Yeah, like in terms of obstacles, I mean, there are many. It's also quite energizing, right? To be able to work through a challenge that's complex and requires, different levels of thinking based on where you're at in the process. I would say at Oxford, our largest opportunity continues to be sort of growing and engaging, diverse talent that understand both real estate and technology, right? And so going about that, in a couple of different ways, we continue to focus on building professional development and training opportunities for the folks within Oxford today. We've done skills assessments, skill gaps, looking at our strategy and understanding the kinds of skills we need now and into the future. What does all that look like? And then how can we, best equip our cross-functional teams to be successful in this environment as we transition, and then as we operate going forward. The other part of it, is that we have had to augment some of our skills and capabilities, right, through recruitment, and we're taking a global approach to that. And so, we're a global organization. We've got offices all over the place, and so we're taking advantage of the fact that we can also source skills all over the place. And so that's been key for us. the other interesting challenge we have is, through 2020, despite COVID, we've really been setting up and practicing how we execute large scale transformation, large scale digital change within the organization. In 2021, our plan is to double the volume of those digital initiatives going through the organization, which is huge. And so, the other challenge or opportunity, however you want to see it, is that, really keeping an eye on and understanding the organization's change tolerance, change resilience, tenacity to execute in tough times. All of that kind of brings change management to the forefront of pretty much every conversation we have. And the one thing that, I'm super happy about with us is that we've really made change management, the center of everything we do. We're taking a methodical approach. We're using a tool called, I saw in the questions, everyone's interested in tools. So we're using a tool called Change Scout, which gives us a bird's eye view of all the changes, all the stakeholders, in which geography, all of the impacts across the organization. It's really quite neat from a leadership perspective, because you can see collision points, you can adjust the pace of change if needed, you can really have an informed view on change across the entire footprint, which is fantastic. And that's something that as we accelerate our pace, is going to be really important for us to get comfortable with managing as well, right? So I'd say, well, as leaders, we want to push, go fast, right? We've got the momentum, let's keep going. We're also, keeping an eye out and tempering that with the organization's ability to absorb that change, and to Kristen and Susie and Eric's point, and to be able to do that effectively, right? And well across the organization.
Susie, would you like to add anything to that? Do you have any sort of examples of how to change perceptions?
Yeah, sometimes I feel like when you're trying to roll something out, if you can get a few early adopters, and sometimes that's sort of your more junior people who are more tech savvy. And so you kind of, get them going on it, and then they kind of go spread the word, oh, this is so easy, and then you get these, the younger crowd to go train, do the training for those who are more, hesitant about trying something new. We found that's really effective, but a lot of times it's all about getting the buzz, the communication about, oh, it's not so bad, it's easy, but where again, you have people that they just are so resistant to wanting to make any kind of change.
Must be quite difficult to get total buy-in from, I guess, the whole business.
Lisa, one other thing I wanted to mention, just to go back to something that Kim said, I think having a tool in place, whether it's something you purchased or something you create on your own, to be able to actually map all the change that's going on in your organization and the impact at a micro level across the enterprise can also dramatically affect larger, any transformation project. Because sometimes these different entities that are delivering things to the field aren't necessarily in sync with each other. So another thing that can disrupt your overall strategy is the fact that if you have 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 change initiatives hitting a particular group in your organization at the same time, that's going to be a huge frustration and probably a fail for 1 or 2 of those initiatives. So you really have to understand, even if it's a small adjustment to the way things are being done, it can have a huge impact if there's multiple other change initiatives going on that impact the same group. So that's something that you have to kind of map out across the entire enterprise.
Yeah, Eric, sorry.
I'm sorry. Oh, I'm so sorry, Louisa.
No, go for it.
Kristen, like just building on that too, I think, and I'm relatively new to Oxford, but learning that, different geographies, different teams, different groups also have different change tolerances, right? And so it's not like a one size fits all approach. You really need to, keep your finger on the pulse of what's going on and be open to that two-way communication, right? But at the same time, I would say, I used the word tenacity before, being tenacious, right? Continuing to push and not sort of allowing the organization to lag where there's no real reason for that to happen, right?
And Eric, do you want to go into there's two different types of changes? There's cultural and there's more sort of traditional change which businesses will experience during any sort of tech sort of integration.
Yeah, so we at Berkadia have actually launched a cultural change effort in parallel with our digital transformation effort. We call it the Berkadia Way. And a lot of it is designed to get people to maybe take a little bit broader perspective on their role. It is designed to try and focus more on outcomes. A lot of us, particularly sometimes people who've been with an organization for quite a while, we start becoming very attached to what we do as opposed to the outcomes that we're trying to drive. And so the goal of our entire cultural transformation effort is to really pave the ground so that way, as our digital transformation evolves, we can hopefully break down some of those barriers that you traditionally see in the organization and ultimately make sure that our digital efforts are aligned with our operational efforts and both of them can come together to drive success.
Kim, do you want to add anything onto that?
I agree wholeheartedly. No, I mean, you need to deal with both, right? You need to deal with both all the time. And I think the other dimension that we've all learned quite recently is that there's external factors as well, right? Things in the world are going to happen. Things change every day. Every location is in a different color of red, green, yellow, whatever the colors are. You've got to pay attention to all of that, right? And pace yourself accordingly. So, yeah.
And looking at developing technology in-house rather than just bringing it in from outside. Are any of you developing technology at the moment? I think Susie, you mentioned you were.
Yeah, so we do have a rule of thumb that, we would much rather buy than build. But, some of the tools are kind of in between where they're, configurable, like a Salesforce, a Jira, where, you get the tool, but you still have to somewhat develop it and build it out according to, what your requirements are. And so I don't know that you can never fully get away from development, whether, again, you're developing some interface between, all your various systems. So we really do a little bit of both, but, our preference is to take advantage of, the third-party, tools that are already out there, do as less development as you can, unless whatever you're developing is going to give you some kind of, competitive advantage to, developing something new and unique. Like maybe you're developing a customer-facing website that's going to do something special for your clients. So that's sort of our viewpoint of what we're using our technology resources for.
Okay, awesome. And then that, I guess, goes into Rajiv's question as well. This is aimed at Susie, Eric, and Kim. In these times where customer interactions or customer capture being limited to telephone and video, how much are real estate and property management companies investing in CRM to facilitate customer interactions, business operations, from sales to leasing to FN and so forth? Kim, would you like to add on to that or answer the question again?
I think in terms of how much are we investing, at Oxford, we've, increased our investment in technology, 25% year over year for the last 3 years, and we'll continue to do that. And that investment, gets funneled into, I'll call it strategic platforms like CRM, like process areas that allow us to lease more efficiently, more effectively, to understand, our overall asset management stance and how we're doing there, and tools and data to help us kind of get a better handle on that. But yeah, I mean, there's a massive amount of investment happening, and a challenge for us within the technology organization is how do we shift our whole organization from, what was primarily I'll call it maintenance and support type focus, to what is now, 100% aligned to Oxford strategy, Oxford business outcomes, driving, I'm going to say, like, real business value across the organization. That's been a massive shift for us over the last 5 years, but definitely in the last, 1.5 years for sure, right? So pouring in investment, I might be the happiest person around the table because generally speaking, like we get more money to spend, right? Because there's that value on the other side. There is that ROI, and it's clear.
So how do you, big question here, how do you vet? So you've got all the money in the world. How do you vet what's the right technology and therefore the right strategy for the company? I mean, no matter how much money you have, it must be pretty hard to make those calls. Susie, obviously, PGIM's done a lot of investment. What's your whole process behind it?
Yeah, so at first, you need to sort of establish, what is your business problem? What are you trying to, get better at, automate? And so then, based on those requirements, then really doing the research to find out, what's out there, and then taking the time to pilot it, and then also making sure, does that tool, if you're trying to take everything to the cloud, does that have that kind of architecture? So there's all these different elements, maybe it's pricing, architecture, does it do the job? Does it work across all your product lines? Does it work in all your different countries? So all those things need to be taken into an account. There's definitely no one simple rule of thumb.
Has anyone else got anything to sort of add, or vetting strategies?
I can maybe just build on that a little bit. I would say, maybe what's right for Eric and Susie and your organization isn't right for us, right? So I think, there's so much out there. You do need to set out a bit of a framework and some guidance based on your own organizational objectives. I think at a high level, it's really important. We talk about best-in-class SaaS. You're like, what does that mean? Well, it's a guiding principle, right? It doesn't mean that we always pick best-in-class SaaS applications as our application of choice in a certain situation, right? It's just a guiding principle. We want to head in that direction. But to Susie's point, there's areas where we're building capability internally that we think is a competitive advantage, and we're going to approach that maybe just a little bit differently, right? And so I think having a set of guiding principles is important, a bit of a framework to make those decisions, making sure that at least with us within the technology organization, all of that, everything we do needs to be aligned to a business outcome. So this is like a business aligned technology strategy. It's not technology for technology's sake. It's not, hey, there's a new cool product out there, let's just grab it and implement it in a pilot or whatnot, right? It's like, let's align this, let's make sure it's aligned to an outcome that we want and need. And that also helps with buy-in and all of that stuff, right? And so that's one piece. The other thing is then you need to govern it, right? So we've got architecture review boards, we've got frameworks that get into some of the details around that. And so I think there's a couple layers there to make sure you're picking the right technology. I don't know that there's any one good answer for any decision I've seen lately anyways, right? It's pretty complicated sometimes. So
I think there's a lot of shiny toys out there to choose from these days. It's easy to get distracted with all the shiny things, but as a simple rule of thumb, looking at where you have the highest amount of redundancy, the highest level of administrative tasks, where is it important to have automation? Those things should be automated so that you can get your humans out in front doing things that humans should be doing, is a great place to start. If you're just at the beginning of the journey and trying to figure out what to choose.
Is anyone? Yeah, perfect. Eric, go.
Sorry, I would just echo everything that has been said so far. It is really difficult to have a formula or algorithm that kicks out. Do you build something? Do you buy something? As was mentioned several times, there are a lot of shiny objects out there that sometimes it's easy to get distracted by, but they don't actually have a good fit for your business. Some of the guiding principles we have at Berkadia when making these decisions are things around risk, in terms of information sharing, data sharing. You know, if there's something out there that can help us reduce our risk, if we have an information security incident, that would be quite devastating to our business. So that's one of the things we look at, trying to eliminate that duplicate data entry. Can a particular external system integrate with other systems we're using is another thing that's really important for us. And then lastly, just trying to make sure we have a single source of truth. You know, with all the different systems we use, it is really easy to go and look at a particular property and see different data points depending what system you're looking at. That leads to a lot of confusion and ultimately bad decisions in the organization. So those are just a couple of the guiding principles that we try to use when we're making the make versus buy decision.
I was just going to say, you know, there's you're going to need good BI coming out of any of this, and so again, equally as important as understanding the right technology for where you are in your business is the fact that you will at some point, if you're not already, need some BI, and so you have to have clean data. So look at the systems that are already collecting data, make sure, because garbage in is garbage out. So make sure what you're putting into your systems is going to give you the output you need from a data analytics standpoint and be able to give you the insights that you need to make better decisions down the road.
For sure. Has anyone got anything else to add? To Susie, we'd like to add to that?
No, I think totally agree with all the comments that have been made on that topic.
Wonderful. Audience, we're coming nearly to the end of the webinar. If any of you have any questions you'd like to ask, please shoot them through. And we'll sort of round it off fairly sort of shortly. Otherwise, I'll just sort of sum up the webinar so far, and I'm sure all our wonderful panel will be happy to hear from you. But I think summing it up, and feel free to sort of add to it any of the panel, but it's clear there's no doubt a fair amount of sort of obstacles such as implementation and staffing issues when it comes down to tech adoption across sort of real estate, whether it's a fund or sort of an agency. Obviously, another big issue is senior sort of change transformation management. It'll be slow, it'll probably be quite expensive, but as we probably develop through trial and error, and webinars like this, where we're having, you know, conversations with some leaders in this space who are all trialing at the moment, hopefully we'll all develop together and get there sooner rather than later. But just to round off, thank you to everyone who tuned in today. Big thank you to all the CREtech team for putting this together and our amazing panel. And I'm sure everyone will be happy to hear from you on any further questions to delve into it. And then if you want to reach out to me about anything to do with talent and hiring, would love to chat. So thank you to everyone. I hope everyone's had a great start to their week. And yeah, I think that we're coming to the end.